Hello, my name is Neha and you're watching this video on the Pratyancha channel. This is the third video for the poem Michael by William Wordsworth. If you've not watched the first two parts, pause this video right here, go to the description box, access the two links, watch the two videos and then come back. Up to now, we have seen that Michael lives in this beautiful part of northwest England and he's a shepherd. He's a very strong man and he's very much in tune with his surroundings. He can hear the music of the hills. He's absolutely prepared for any challenge that his natural context throws at him. He's a very hardworking man. He lives with his wife, who's as hardworking and industrious, and they have a son named Luke, and they have two sheepdogs. Now, in this video, the lines that we shall discuss, Wordsworth will tell us about a problem that Michael faces and the possible solution he works out to deal with this problem. So let's discuss Michael by William Wordsworth. Continuing to tell us about the industrious life that Michael lives, Wordsworth says, "Thus living on through such a length of years, the shepherd, if he loved himself, must needs have loved his helpmate. But to Michael's heart, this son of his old age was yet more dear, less from instinctive tenderness, the same fond spirit that blindly works in the blood of all." So they were living through this length of years, this time period, and the shepherd, he loved his son very much, not just as a helpmate and not just because he was his own flesh and blood. Instinctively, people love their own children, so this was a pervasive feeling, but he also loved him for another reason, which Wordsworth will tell us about, and this was a son of old age. Michael had had this son when he was past his prime, when he was past his youth. Then that a child, more than all other gifts that earth can offer to declining man, brings hope with it and forward-looking thoughts and stirrings of inquietude when they, by tendency of nature, needs must fail. So Wordsworth says that, of course, Michael loves his son. He loves him because he's his helpmate. He loves him because he's own flesh and blood. But there's one more important reason that Michael loves his son for, and this is because it's a gift of nature which gives you hope. And especially to a declining man. Michael is an old man and he's adding more years to his life by each passing day. He feels that he's growing weak and infirm, and in that sense, his son offers him hope for a better tomorrow, for a future that he loves to look forward to. And he has these forward-looking thoughts, and sometimes he also feels that they give him a little bit of stress, or they give him some kind of tension, because when you think of the future and you think of things that you would want to occur in the future, you also think of prospects that these dreams may not come true, these wishes may not come true. So sometimes he had this inquietude inside of him, which means that he was peaceless, but at other times his son gave him a lot of hope. Exceeding was the love he bare to him, his heart and his heart's joy. For oftentimes old Michael, while he was a babe in arms, had done him female service, not alone for pastime and delight, as is the use of fathers, but with patient mind enforced to acts of tenderness, and he had rocked his cradle as with a woman's gentle hand. So Michael loved his son very much, so much that when Luke was a baby, Michael had tended to the baby like a woman would to her son. So it wasn't just for pastime, like some fathers would do it for some kind of joy, or they're home for a little time and they would take the baby in their arms and play with the baby. No, Michael had actually given Luke the care at times which a mother would give, with as much sincerity and with as much tenderness. This is how much he loved his son. And in the later time, ere yet the boy, in the later time, which means that when Luke grew up to be a little boy, and he says ere yet the boy, so before, ere is before, and in a later time, before yet the boy had put on boy's attire, did Michael love, albeit of a stern unbending mind, to have the young one in sight. When he wrought in the field on his shepherd's stool, sate with a fettered sheep before him stretched under the large old oak that near his door stood single, and from matchless depth of shade chosen for the shearer's covert from the sun. So when the little child was growing up, he was yet to become a boy. Michael would never lose sight of him because he wanted to take care of him. He wanted to always be sure that the child is protected. So he had the young one in his sight when he was in the field or he was sitting on the shepherd's stool. And now he describes this wonderful scene for us. There is a large old oak tree outside Michael's cottage, and it offers a great shade from the sun, covert from the sun, and that is really required because one of the jobs that a shepherd does is that he takes wool off the sheep's skin. He has to shear the wool off, and for that you need to be outdoors and you need to be saved from the sun's rays. So here he says that maybe the child used to sit on the stool that was the shearer's stool where a shepherd would sit and shear his sheep, so he always had the child in his sight. And a fettered sheep, a sheep which was tied to something, fettered to something, so that it could be sheared. Thence, in our rustic dialect, was called the clipping tree, a name which yet it bears. So, clipping is also the process of shearing, of removing this wool from the skin of the sheep. So because this tree and the stool underneath it were the site, the place where the exercise of shearing took place, the tree, the oak tree, was called the clipping tree, and this is the name it yet bears. So this is the name the tree yet has in the present times when Michael and his son have long gone past, and Wordsworth is telling us their story. If you remember, the story in the first part starts at this heap of stones, and this is the sheep pen that father and son were building together when Luke was to leave. So this is a long past story, and all that remains is that heap of stones, and Wordsworth asserts here that the clipping tree also still bears its name. There, while they two were sitting in the shade, with others around them, earnest all and blithe, would Michael exercise his heart with looks of fond correction and reproof bestowed upon the child, if he disturbed the sheep by catching at their legs, or with his shouts scared them while they lay still beneath the shears. So while they would be in the shade and Michael would be shearing the sheep, he would sometimes scold his child. He had loved him with all his heart, but he also wanted to correct the child. He also wanted to tell the child what is to be done, what is not to be done. So sometimes he would scold him, and these were the times when the child was disturbed the sheep, maybe catch at their legs, or shout so much the sheep got scared. And so Michael would also make sure that he was disciplining the child, not just taking care of him. So in this part of the poem, Wordsworth has told us about the loving relationship that the father and the son shared. And when, by heaven's good grace, the boy grew up a healthy lad, and carried in his cheek 2 steady roses that were 5 years old, then Michael from a winter coppice cut with his own hand a sapling, which he hooped with iron, making it throughout in all due requisites a perfect shepherd's staff, and gave it to the boy. So by God's grace, Michael grew up in the house, and he was 5 years old now, and his cheeks were very rosy. The poet says it was like 2 roses on each cheek that you could identify. And then Michael decided that the boy, because he was with his sheep, needed a stick to mind the sheep, a staff. And he cut it out from a tree there, and then he shaped it very well so that Michael could carry it around while minding Luke could carry it around while minding the sheep. So Michael made this particular staff for Luke and gave it to the boy, wherewith equipped he as a watchman oftentimes was placed at gate or gap, to stem or turn the flock, and to his office prematurely called, there stood the urchin, as you will divine, something between a hindrance and a help. So the boy used the stick very much. Either he was at the gap from where the flock had to be steered, or he was at the gate from where the sheep would come out or the sheep had to go in, and he started using the stick, the staff that his father made for him. And sometimes he also behaved like an urchin or like a vagabond, not very disciplined, perhaps the poet is trying to tell us, and he was between a hindrance and a help. So at all times, it wasn't that he was helping his father. Sometimes he would do things that would not be the right thing to do. But this is how the child was learning this craft or this task from his father, that how to tend to a flock of sheep. And for this cause, not always, I believe, receiving from his father hire of praise, though naught was left undone, which staff or voice or looks or threatening gestures could perform. So he received praise from his father, and nothing was left undone. He used, or the shepherds used, their staff, their voice, their looks, or threatening gestures, but they do get the things done. So this is how the father was training Luke as he was a young boy to become a shepherd. But soon as Luke, full 10 years old, could stand against the mountain blasts and to the heights, not fearing toil, nor length of weary ways, he with his father daily went, and they were as companions. Why should I relate that objects which the shepherd loved before were dearer now? That from the boy there came feelings and emanations, things which were light to the sun and music to the wind, and that the old man's heart seemed born again. The old man's heart seemed born again, which is to say that he was full of hope. When he looked at his boy, the boy emanated strength, the boy emanated hope, and he was full 10 years old. He wouldn't get as tired as a child would get. He did not fear toil or hard work, and he did not even feel that they had been working the whole day long and they needed to stop or take rest. And the shepherd loved him more than before, and he felt that the boy had grown up. He was reaching his 18th year, and he was his comfort and his daily hope. Thus, in his father's sight, the boy grew up, and now when he had reached his 18th year, he was his comfort and his daily hope. The boy had become a lot of comfort, source of lot of comfort for the father. He was the hope, and Luke was now 18 years old. So Wordsworth gets us from the point when Luke was a baby in his father's arms, then Luke was 5 years old, and then Luke was 10 years old, and finally now he's 18 years old, and the child is all grown up. While in this sort the simple household lived from day to day, to Michael's ear there came distressful tidings. Long before the time of which I speak, the shepherd had been bound in surety for his brother's son, a man of an industrious life and ample means. Now, this day-to-day life for Michael and his family was continuing. They had a lot of hard work to do. Wordsworth earlier has told us that perhaps they were not very happy, or they did not generate a lot of joy for them, but their life gave them a lot of hope. And in this eager hope, in this eager industry, they lived their lives. And they were living this life in that beautiful tenor. And suddenly, Michael gets to hear of things which stress him out. These are things that have been occurring in the life of his brother's son. Now, Michael had pledged that he was responsible for the surety that the business that his brother's son was into. And the brother's son was a rich man. He'd been doing very well. He'd been a hard-working man. But now things were not going the way that everyone had hoped they would. So what happened was that unforeseen misfortunes suddenly had pressed upon him, and old Michael now was summoned to discharge the forfeiture, a grievous penalty, but little less than half his substance. So the brother's son, his business was not doing well. Misfortunes had come to him, and since Michael had offered the surety, he was summoned that now you have to pay the penalty. This was a large penalty, a large sum of money. Half his substance, less than half of what Michael owned, all the property, all the money put together, half of it was required to now settle this penalty. Michael got very tensed when he heard this. This unlooked for claim at the first hearing for a moment took more hope out of his life than he supposed that any old man could ever have lost. Unlooked for claim? Michael really did not expect or hope that this challenge would befall him, and this was something that came out of the blue and hit him very hard. And sometimes when a large problem faces us, for a moment we are dissettled. We tend to feel that nobody in this world would be suffering as much as I'm suffering right now. This is what Michael felt, but slowly the news sunk in and he summoned the strength to look at the problem in its face. And he lost a lot of hope in the first few moments of learning about this challenge in life. As soon as he'd armed himself with strength to look his troubles in the face, it seemed the shepherd's sole resource to sell out at once a portion of his patrimonial fields. So when he summoned the courage to look at the problem in its face, he realized that the only solution was that he sells a portion of his fields, his ancestral fields that he had been living on, that he had been using for his flock of sheep. And Michael said, this is the only solution. If I don't sell this land, I cannot get the money required for the penalty. And he's very tense to think about this. Such was his first resolve. He thought again and his heart failed him. So at first he decided that this was the only solution, but then his heart failed him. Isabel, said he, 2 evenings after he'd heard the news, I've been toiling more than 70 years, and in the open sunshine of God's love have we all lived. Yet if these fields of ours should pass into a stranger's hand, I think that I could not lie quiet in my grave. So at first he thought that was a good solution. He would sell a part of his fields and therefore he would be able to bear the penalty. But then he thought that he would die a peaceless man. He would not be able to answer to his own soul. He felt that for 70 years they have worked hard on this land under the sunshine and they've been blessed. He doesn't now believe that this is the right way to go about it. So he's talking to his wife and he says that I don't think that I could lie quiet in my grave. I will be a peaceless man in my death. I really have to make sure that there has to be some other solution, and I don't want to sell my ancestral lands. Our lot is a hard lot. The son himself has scarcely been more diligent than I, and I have lived to be a fool at last to my own family. Michael now says a very philosophical thing to his wife, that I know that shepherds like us, people like us, live a very hard life. And he makes a very bold comparison here, that if you think that the sun rises every morning and sets every evening and does this very diligently through the day as well, I have not been less diligent than the sun. Perhaps it is the sun that has been less hardworking than me. So he makes this comparison and he says, we've had a very, very hard life and we have done our bit with responsibility, with care, with patience. And he feels that I think I've been a fool to my own family. Why did I do this? He's regretting this decision, that this is not right, that he should have to pay this penalty for his brother's son. With this, we come to the end of the 3rd video on the poem Michael by William Wordsworth. We have seen that Michael faces a huge challenge in his life, and the first solution that he thinks of, which is to sell his parental land, his ancestral property, is something he doesn't believe in anymore because he feels this is not the right way to go about things. So now he'll devise another solution to resolve this problem that has presented itself in his life. We shall see what the solution Michael devises and what happens after that solution is implemented. Please stay tuned for video 4. If you like this video, give a thumbs up to the channel. You can also follow me on Instagram. My handle is pratyancha.in. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the Pratyancha channel on YouTube, do it right away. Thank you. Keep watching.